Hello, welcome to a crafty vlog. My name is Ellie from Craft House Magic, and today I'm going to take you through my crafty day. So first of all, this morning I've got a couple of things to make for the shop. I'm going to get those packed and posted, but I'm going to be working on my crochet blanket, and also I'm hoping to fix the edge of a shawl and also to make a pinny as well. So see if I get on with all those things. Fingers crossed. First of all, I need to cut out the fabric ready to make these bags. You can also purchase the pattern and kits to make these bags as well. And at the moment I've got some gorgeous Liberty print. They're all quilters cottons, but they're slightly thicker than normal quilters cotton, so it's really nice to work with. I've recently recorded some new tutorial videos to go along with the pattern, so if you've purchased the pattern, or if you go and purchase the pattern now, you'll be able to access those tutorial videos as well. I've just got to do a lot of pressing and sew the inside shut. And give it a trim because there's some threads that I've missed, but this one's nearly finished, and then I've got a couple of DPN cases to make. So before I take the bag to the pressing mat, I'm going to make some DPN cases first. So I have a free video tutorial for DPN cases and a scissor case as well, so I'll leave links to those in the description bar down below. But I'm making a nice long 8-inch one for 8-inch needles, so I'm going to better get on with that because I've got 2 of those to make. So I finished stitching my DPN case. I've just got to turn it the right way. There we go. I just need to tidy it up a bit and stitch the inside closed. So like I said before, I do have proper free tutorials on this, so you can follow along properly with that one. I'm just stitching the inside closed to secure it. So I'm giving these DPNs a press. And then I'll be putting the press studs on. I finished the small bag. I've got a medium-sized bag to sort of show you what the difference is. Obviously this is quite a lot smaller than the medium, and this is good for like sort of a sock project or something small, like for one skein. It's box bottom as well, but I won't open it out because I'm going to post it now. So I'm going to pack a couple of orders and then get going with the pinny. Right, so I'm now starting my sort of crafty afternoon. I need to duplicate this pinny. So Mum bought me this for Christmas, and it's a waterproof pinny that I use for dyeing. And it has started to come away, the actual waterproof stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it again and make another one out of some fabric. Now it's going to be a really simple, easy project, and I'm going to use this pinny as a template to copy it. I've got some fabric that my friend Liz gave me that she didn't think she'll use anymore. It's basically like that waterproof fabric to make a tablecloth with. And I thought, oh, I can make a pinny with it. And I do use these an awful lot. I did have one, I've had 2 before this, and they've disintegrated slowly. But this one has the shortest life that I've ever had in the waterproof pinny. So I'm going to make a couple more, and hopefully these 2 will last ages and ages. So I'm going to use this as a template, lay it out on the fabric and show you the making process. So I'm going to take it off. I do have some cotton webbing that I'm going to use for the straps and things, like similar to this, and I'm going to use the same technique as this is used and just top stitch it down onto the back of the pinny, just so that it's easy to apply and it's easy to make. You could make one of these for the kitchen as well, but I use these a lot for the garage for dyeing because I just get dye everywhere, and if I'm nipping in with a pair of jeans on, I'm then not going to get dye all over my clothes, so it's quite handy. I don't know whether you can see close up there where the material's coming away, which hasn't lasted very long at all. It was from one of the garden centres in Shrewsbury. I think it's from Percy Throwers. So I'm a bit disappointed with the quality. It says a Cook Smart 100% cotton with PVC coating, so we shall see whether these new ones will last a bit longer. So I've laid the pinny out onto the fabric, and this fabric is actually folded over, so I'll get 2 pinnies out of this one piece of fabric. So what I'm going to do is mark a ½ inch all the way around the outside, so I've got plenty of seam allowance that I can fold over, and hopefully that should be okay. I might have a bit of trouble folding over half an inch of seam allowance on this curved edge, so perhaps I will measure the seam allowance they've used and add that instead, and then I can mark all around, sort of making myself a pattern, and then cut that out. So the seam allowance on this is about 3/8 of an inch to the back, so actually if I cut it ½ an inch it's really not going to be much difference. Maybe I should stick to the 3/8 of an inch though. Yeah, I'll stick to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and mark all the way around this. First of all, before I start marking though, I'm going to put some pattern weights on this so it doesn't move around. I did give it a wipe over to make sure that the dye wasn't going to go on over everything before I've laid this out here, so don't worry. What I could do actually on this long straight edge, I could just use a rotary cutter to cut 3/8 of an inch all the way across the edge. So I'm going to see if I can manage that, and it'll be easier to cut out then. I could of course do it a bit longer, but I'm not amazingly tall to be quite honest, so might be better off just sticking to the original length. That seems to work okay. I could perhaps do the same with this side. Well, it seems to be working okay, so I'll just keep moving it around bit by bit. I'm just going to cut this fabric out of the way so that I don't end up with it all pulled down. I don't think I'll use the rest of the fabric for anything, so that'll just have to go in the bin, I'm afraid, because there's not a lot that I'd be using this sort of fabric for. Quite handy that I can literally use the edge of it as a guide. I'm afraid you're not going to be able to see this side very well. Right, I may have to sort of eyeball my way around this corner piece. What I would suggest is if you actually did mark it rather than do this, but I'm pretty good with a rotary cutter, so I'm hoping that it'll be reasonably smooth, the line. I think that worked out okay. It probably could be a bit straighter, but I think it's good enough. I'm running out of time today, so I'm going to try and get as much done as I can this afternoon. Right, there we go. We have 2 copies of the original pattern, but we just need to fold in the edges really. Right, so we now have 2 of those pieces cut out. I've just been looking here, and what they've done is that before they've actually top stitched that facing outwards, they've just put it in the seam. So I'll put my ties in the seams, top stitch the seams down, and then I'll top stitch the actual ties outwards so that they're in the correct orientation. So I'll do the same. You can see what the make of this is, Cook Smart. Right, So I'll get on with using my sewing clips to clip all the way around the sides of this piece, and then I can hopefully get those 2 pinnies top stitched today. I'm just going to pin one of these at a time. Hopefully it shouldn't be too difficult. And I've got a massive tub of these clips that I can use, and I've got a little ruler that I can just have to make sure that I'm doing about a 3/8 of an inch all the way along. It seems to press reasonably well with my nail actually. I don't want to risk putting an actual iron on it because it is like plastic PVC coated, I think. It is definitely waterproof though. I confirmed it by running the fabric under the tap, which is always good. I think you can get this sort of material from places like Dunelm or The Range, and they sell it as a sort of tablecloth material really. First one I bought of these was from a market at a church up the road from me, and because I got on with it so well, I then sought out to find another one, but I suppose I could get like a leather one, but I really don't want to be spending a lot of money on something that I'm going to be stood dying in the garage with and getting covered in dye. The original ones I bought from the church market were, or church fair or whatever it was, they had like eyelets to hold the cord at the sides, which you could do as well, but I'm figuring that I'm not going to spend too much time on these because they're not something that is to look pretty, they're functional things. I'm going to do the straight edges first and then come back to do the curved edge. I figured that'd be the easiest way to do it. Right, that's all the edges done that aren't curved. Let's have a go with the curved edge. Hopefully it won't be too fiddly. Oh, it doesn't seem too bad. I think there is a slight stretch on the bias of the fabric, so that's good. Not as difficult as I thought it would be. I might have to readjust once I've got right to the other end, but I think it's going to be okay. Brilliant. Obviously, because it's got this plastic coating, I'm not going to have to double up the seam either to stop it fraying or anything. So that's handy. Right. We have all our pins in place. Not pins, clips. I need to measure how long the cords were on here. Right, how long is this? I'll measure it so you can see. This is coming up about 22.5 inches for the side ties. Sometimes I keep things from bags so that I can reuse it for other things. So what I'm going to do is do an extra bit of fabric so that I can put it in the seam. Let's have a look what that comes to. So that is 23 inches. So there we go. I'll cut those actually the same for the other one as well. So if I cut enough for the two, on the original they've just put the neck attachments right next to where the seam is, so I'm just going to do the same with mine. I'll pop the webbing into the seam as far as it'll go. There we go. Make sure that this isn't folded over or twisted. There we go, that's the bit put around the neck. And then I've got two pieces here for the sides. I'll top stitch them closed So this, the original again, is just added just under this where the seam folds over, so it isn't right on the corner. So I'm going to do the same as well. It's a bit of a cheat really, because it doesn't come from right on the edge of the fabric, but that's what they've done. So I'm going to cheat as well. That's that attachment. And on this side, hopefully you can see this side as well. Right, so that one's all pinned in place. I'm going to do the same for the other one and then go get the machine out. I'll just fold that up neatly so that everything doesn't get muddled up. Right, so I've just put a size 14 jeans needle in my machine, just because it's a little bit thicker than I normally use this fabric. And I've got a foot which I've previously put some sellotape on to make it glide better over sort of PVC fabrics. And I have used this in the past and it seems to have worked, so hopefully it'll help this time. I'm going to pop that underneath the sewing machine foot. So the type of tape that I put on the bottom of the foot was like the matte, like magic tape. So it might have a slightly more smooth surface to a normal sellotape. So it's called magic tape in the UK, Scotch magic tape. I'm sure that there's equivalent elsewhere in the world. Let's see if it works first. Right, I'm about to start. I'm going to top stitch from the wrong side in the hopes that it will work a little bit better, because the feed dogs underneath should pull the sort of sticky side along a bit more. I don't know. This actually isn't as sort of smooth and sticky as some of the PVC coated fabrics that I've worked with in the past, so I don't think it should be a problem. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch it all around. Fingers crossed. So I'm just getting to the point where I'm adding one of the tethers and one of the ties on. And what I've been doing when I get to the corner is to just stitch along where the seam overlaps so that that doesn't flap at all. Right, so I've stitched all around once and I'm going to fold out the ties and just top stitch like those so that they're facing outwards and in the right direction. So I'm just going to fold that out and then I'm going to follow the line that I've stitched previously. It also makes it really secure the attachment as well, so I'm going to do that with all of them. And I'll make a start on the second one as well. I'm just trimming my threads as I go. So that's that first one, top stitch so it's facing outwards. So I'll do the same with the others. Right, that one is done. I'm going to quickly do the second one so that I've got the two done at the same time. But I'm really pleased with it so far. I don't think my stitching is the best on this because I'm not used to working with this fabric as much, but it's very functional and actually the print of the fabric is very pretty. So there we are, I've got two pinnies finished. Really pleased to make use of the fabric my friend Liz gave me, and I've got two functional pinnies that'll stop me getting dye all over my clothes. So I'm really pleased about those. I've done it really simple. I don't think it needs to be overcomplicated because it's a simple thing for a job in the garage anyway. I think this fabric is rather pretty. I was very tempted to use this as a tablecloth, but it wasn't big enough for our table anyway, so ideal for making some pinnies with. So on to the next job. I think I might have a go at a bit of crochet. So this is the Daisy Puff blanket by Sandra from the Cherry Heart podcast, and she does a separate tutorial for the actual individual hexagons, and it's called the Daisy Puffagon, I think. That's what it says on Ravelry anyway. And she's got individual tutorials for the little hexagons, how to join them. And then she's got a paid for pattern for how to set up for the whole blanket sort of thing, and the border and everything. So I am working on a big blanket. This is going to be a big blanket, I've decided. I love it. I think so. I'd done about 5 of these on one of these one of these vlog videos, and I decided I quite liked it, and then I kept looking at it and thinking, oh, I don't know if it's too much flowers, but actually what I've done, so on the original ones I started, I did one colour flower and then one colour hexagon, and I think if I've got a nice mixture of ones with the 2 colour hexagon and the separate colour flower, I really like that. So I'm going to carry on mixing it up a little bit. On the original pattern that Sandra's got, what she's done is a different colour inside as well, but I'm not so bothered about the actual flowers looking like proper flowers, because it's a little bit more abstract, being sort of blues and greens and greys. But I am loving how this is coming along. So you can see that I'm sort of doing a little bit of a row at a time. I'm doing sort of 4 hexagons normally in an evening, and I've got one missing here that I'm going to do today to sort of show you how I do mine. But she has got a full video tutorial on how to do the hexagons and how to join them, which is absolutely brilliant. So I absolutely love this. I was going to talk to you a little bit about how I decide where I put my colours. So this is basically using scraps that I've left over. So quite a few episodes back I sorted out a lot of my yarn stash into colours, and I've picked the colour scheme for this based on one of the baskets that I've got. I have omitted some of the colours out of that basket though, because I wanted it to go with our lounge. I had sort of turquoises, blues and greens basket here, but I have omitted the very green colours. I'm sticking to sort of teals in the middle and turquoises really, but also the sort of the green side of turquoise, if that makes sense, so that it goes really nicely with the lounge. We've got sort of turquoises and blues and greens in there, but I think the colours are coming really nicely together. I love it. So when I decide what colour to do next, I'm looking at the whole overall blanket and I'm trying to spread the colours relatively evenly. So I've just done this hexagon here, and I thought that I could do with a little bit more sort of darker turquoises so it mirrors this part of the blanket, and then I'll probably, when I extend it this side, I'll do another sort of turquoise colour, darker turquoise colour, so that the colours are relatively evenly distributed. So that's how I'm deciding. Although I do notice that sometimes when I'm in the evenings, the light isn't brilliant when it's actually got dark, and I'm just relying on sort of the overhead lights in my lounge, that it's more difficult to decide on colour placement. So my advice is to try and pick what colours you're going to do for a set of hexagons ahead of time before it gets dark, because it does make a lot of difference, I think. I've noticed as well, though, if I'm using my neck light, which has got a very nice white light, I can use that to see the colours a little bit better, but it's never really as good as a lovely sort of daylight. I love it. It's got quite big, I think. It's taken me, I think I've been working on this for the last nearly a week, doing sort of 4 hexagons a night where I can. So it has taken quite a long time, but I'm using up scraps and I'm really enjoying it, so that's all that really matters, isn't it? But I love it. So I thought I'd give you a few tips on the process of crocheting them as I'm actually working on this next one. So I'm holding 2 fingering weight yarns double. These 2 little balls are hand wound and they happen to be the same colour, so I'm just holding those together. If they're hand wound, it's obviously more difficult to find both ends, because you've obviously got to unwind it to get the centre ball, but because I've got 2 the same, that's absolutely perfect. Normally I can just grab the centre of one of the ones I've caked on my ball winder and use that with the outside at the same time. And I'm going to do basically exactly the same as what Sandra's shown you really on the videos, but I'll just show you the little tweaks that I've made to make mine a bit different. The first of the puff stitches always seems to be the most fiddly, so once you've got past that one, they do get a little bit easier. So that's 2 little puff stitches. I'm going to work my way all the way around. So I finished the puff bit in the middle. What I'm going to do is change colour. So what I like to do after I've done this bit is sew the end in the middle, Now I did work over myself when I went round that centre bit, but I do like to sew the end in a little bit just to make sure that it's really secure. So I've threaded my needle and I'm just going to sew around that loop, tuck in my needle just underneath those loops of stitches that we've made, just to make sure it's really secure, and also it draws it in a little bit to make it a nice tight centre, which I like. And I think doing it at this stage just makes it easier rather than leaving it till you've got a whole hexagon. And I can just cut the end off there. So I've just threaded my yarn around that centre bit where we crocheted around that first little ring. So that's the right side. And they look really cute, don't they? So for the second colour I'm going to use, I think it was this nice bright one, because I was looking at what I'd done so far and I was thinking I need another bright one on this side of the blanket. So I decided to do this, just one colour of hexagon in contrast to the flower, rather than the three colours, because I have got a nice bright one over this side, and I wanted to have a nice bright patch over on this side of the blanket to sort of balance it out. I'm trying to alternate as well between sort of dark, medium, light centres to the flowers and make them sort of contrast to the ones that I've paired them with in each of the hexagons. So there, that's one of the hexagons finished. I'm going to attach it at this position here. First of all, I wanted to talk about yarn weights though. So I have got a mixture of a little bit of DK and some 2 fingering weight held double, and I have in the odd place used some Aran weight yarn, which is this one here. This one does come up very slightly bigger though when I've done it in just one colour in the hexagon area. Where I've used thicker yarn, say just on the outside, it obviously doesn't make so much of a difference. So I think if you disperse your Aran weight yarn just in little areas, it doesn't make the little hexagons much different from each other, if that makes sense. But I have used a little bit. I think if the hexagons were sort of any bigger, the ratio of the thicker yarn on that bigger item would make more of a difference. If you look closely at these two, this one is very slightly bigger, but I think once you've joined them together you can't really see. But I do like sort of mixing my yarn weights. Normally for a blanket where I'm holding fingering weight double, I'd only really use DK, but I've just been sort of trying out using Aran weight in this one as well. But I think it seems to have worked out okay. And it also means that I'm using all scraps up that I perhaps wouldn't have used previously. Any of the sort of shorter lengths that aren't going to make like an outside bit or an inside bit or the centre part aren't enough for that, then I'm keeping those and I'm going to make a magic knot ball, and I can do a blanket maybe similar to my corner to corner crochet blanket that I've made with those tiny little scraps. I don't like to waste any. In terms of joining, I have used a very slightly different technique to the one Sandra's used in her video tutorial, in that when I actually do the joining, let's turn this over, I'm going to join this one over here. I'm going to join it along this edge here. So when I do the joining, I do it just on the back in along the sides. It'll make sense in a minute. So I've just put the loop to the back of the work and then right sides together, and then I do a double crochet through the corners, right through the corner loops, right through the corner holes, so that's joined those two together. But then when I come to the next bit, and it's always harder on the first stitch where you've actually cast off on that corner, but I've just got my crochet hook through the outside of the back loops and pull that through, so that when I've actually joined them all together, it does make a difference. I'll show you here. So you can see it's joined along the back, but actually the front isn't joined, but it's solidly joined all the way along that panel. So I work that all the way along. Now I'm just make sure that I've got the outside loop, or the loop on the wrong side from both of the hexagons, so that I'm only joining the back of the work together, which I think was a lovely effect. I got it from one of Sandra's other tutorials, but it wasn't for this particular blanket. So I've worked right along that one side, and you can see how nicely that's joined. I just like it because you haven't got those bits of yarn from the adjacent hexagon going over the top of the whole side of the shape. I just think it gives a nice effect. Of course you don't have to join them as you go, but I do like the fact that I'm sort of completing something all the way along, and I don't have as many ends to sew in, because I would have had these ends to sew in at the end of each of the hexagons anyway. I will link the video tutorials that I've talked about on Sandra's channel, including the one where I got joining on the back loop for this one, because it is, I think it's a really nice technique. It really finishes it off nicely. So that's nicely joined on. I'm then going to cut the yarn and pull that through, and then I can sew that in, and that's my last end really to sew in. I've just got to trim these ends here. Because I've worked all the way around here, I feel secure that those ends are sort of under the crochet enough without me having to sew any more in. But when I did the centre bit, I do like to sew that little bit of extra. I'm going to sew this end in as well. I've no idea whether this is the best way to sew in my ends, but this is the way I've been doing it. So I tend to make my way into where you're actually crocheting along, and go along the line where you would be sewing over your ends if you were sewing over any ends. Go along that line, and then they come back on myself. And I feel that should be secure enough. How do you sew your ends in? So there we go, that's joined. So this is the back of my work. I think that looks okay actually. It's not too bad. It's not too untidy, but I do love the front. These cute little puffy flowers. I must admit, I do like the ones that are done with the fingering weight yarn rather than the ones that are done with the DK. I've done this one with DK for instance, and I think I prefer more threads showing rather than them being thicker. But it really doesn't matter, it's just personal preference really. Definitely a blanket I'd recommend. So in terms of colour placement, you can see that it's a little bit random, but I think oh, this sort of side might be lacking in a certain colour, and I'll pick that one out. I try not to use the same colour as what I'm using on the next hexagon, and really trying to use up all those little minis. If you need a little bit of help, the actual pattern for the whole blanket that Sandra's got, that it's a paid for pattern, does give you instructions of the exact layout of where she put her colours. So if you purchase yarn for a certain number of the certain number of colours that she uses in her pattern, and then lay it out exactly how she does it, it just saves you from working out where you're putting your yarns. But I'm using scraps and I want to put mine just in a balanced orientation, and I'm just working out what I'm going to do on the next row. So what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to carry on adding 4 hexagons in a line along in line with these, making a long strip, and then I'll start making it a little bit wider, because I'm feeling like 4 hexagons in an evening is something that I can do, and it's achievable. So at the moment it feels like it's growing really quickly, but obviously once you're doing longer rows then it'll take a little bit longer. So the next thing I wanted to do is unpick the edge of this shawl because it's too tight. Now this is the Lone Skein shawl by HiyaHiya Locatelli. Let me take this blanket from the background so that you can see the pattern a little bit better. It's got this beautiful detail in stripes along a crescent shaped shawl. Now the edge, Liz knitted this for me, and the edge is just says to cast off using a standard. It doesn't say to use a stretchy bind off, so I don't blame Liz for doing an incorrect bind off, but I think I would suggest any shawl really you need to use a stretchy bind off. So Liz bound this off, and it really doesn't give me enough space to be able to block it really nicely. So a lot of shawls you end up with, when you've knitted them, you have this sort of point and you should be able to block it out, but because of this edge I can't block it. So I want to undo this edge and recast it off. What I think I'm going to do is have a look to see if I've got a nice grey yarn that matches the grey tones in this one, because we were very close to finishing the yarn off anyway, and because we're doing a stretchy bind off now I'll probably use more yarn. So I'm going to pick out a grey fingering weight yarn from my stash and do this edge again, but I don't think I'll have time to do it all today, but hopefully I'll be able to get that done for the next video. But isn't this colour gorgeous? This is a yarn from Ducky Darlings that Adam actually bought me for either birthday or Christmas a few years ago, and it is the most beautiful colours, and I definitely want to wear it. So it's been in my sort of fix pile for ages, and just need to undo this carefully and pick up those stitches. I have actually sewn the ends in, which is a bit of a pain. I should have thought, right, I really need to do this, but obviously I didn't think at the time. So I'm wondering if I can just snip the edge stitch and start picking up those stitches. I might make a start just to show you how I get on, and then on the next video hopefully I will have cast off the whole thing. So I've just grabbed some needles, and these are 3.5mm needles. The shawl's knitted on 4.5mm needles, so I'm figuring that because these are slightly thinner it'll be easier to pick up stitches. So obviously it was cast off this. The last stitch would have been cast off this end, so I'm hoping I can sort of tease this out and work out where I was, but I might end up having to just cut it. I must be brave because I'd really want to fix this so that I can actually wear it. I think I'm going to try and just cut the yarn on the edge here. This might be a bad idea, but you know. I'm trying to cut the edge stitch, the very edge stitch, rather than any of the others. Right, I've done it. I'm hoping this will be okay. Right, so I'm going to try and pick up some stitches. This may be a complete disaster, but I'm sure I can make it work somewhere. I'm hoping I've picked the right side that it was finished on, because of course it might have been cast off on the wrong side. I never thought of that. That was a bit silly. We shall see whether this is the disaster I think it might be. Right, I've somehow got to the point where I'm just unravelling these stitches. It's a miracle. I thought I'd cut the wrong thread, but we're okay now. I'm picking up again, so that is very, very good. I've basically got that edge stitch, and these ones here are where the picot edge, where it's been knitted into like a picot. Oh, that's good. I can work all the way along and pick up those stitches. That is such a relief. sometimes it's worth that little bit of a risk to fix it. At the end of the day, I could always just unravel the whole thing and knit it again. There we go, you can see that I've got all those stitches. This here is the rest of the end that's been sewn in, so I'm not going to pull it out just yet. I'll just leave it how it is, or I might just trim it so that it's not going to sort of stick out. But I think I've obviously cut along the row a little bit so that I didn't end up cutting the wrong one, so that's good. So I'm going to work my way all the way along here, and then on the next video I'll show you the shawl with the new cast off edge, because it was so stiff before. But you can see how I'm just pulling that yarn out, and that stitch is just pulling through the stitch below, and I'm catching the stitch below on my needle, and I feel relatively confident that I'll be okay with that. So I just thought I'd do the scary bit on camera for your entertainment. So I think now I'm going to go and have some dinner, and you might see Jensen on our little walk after dinner. Jensen is wearing my shawlography shawl, aren't you? Not that close.
Go, Mummy.
Pardon? Is it cosy?
Yeah.
Go on then, let's go for a walk. Which way are we going? Come on then. Oh, make up your mind.
Mummy, alright.
Okay, let's go this way then. Can you say bye-bye to the camera? So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye!